Well, we are live and we're doing a review of part 6 of the Calexit documentary presented by Warner Brothers Music and Awfully Nice. And I got to say, if you haven't seen any parts of the documentary, watch the documentary. Fantastic storytelling. Even people who don't like Calexit, who think it's a little bit silly, I've shown it to many people. I have a lot of colleagues who don't necessarily believe in this idea, and I like having those colleagues so I can always get realistic feedback. Everybody's saying entertaining, well put together, great story, first person accounts, clips from the media at the time. You really get a sense of what was going on at that moment and what people were thinking. Outstanding documentary, great storytelling. Wanted to start off saying that. Now we're going to get into cleaning up some facts. So again, I'm not saying that this was said or not said, but we have to make sure that the correct information gets out there, and we cannot tolerate misinformation at all. So the first thing I want to point out is that in the documentary, they interviewed Casey Michel, a reporter, and he straight up lied about the amount of help for Calexit that we got from Russia. And his lie was unchecked and put right into the documentary. Furthermore, I'm going to show you how it was a lie. And I'm also going to show you how I informed the documentary crew that that information isn't correct. And yet somehow the correct information didn't get into the documentary. I don't know how, but I'm going to show you how Casey Michel lied. People were provided the correct information, and none of the correct information got into the documentary for whatever reason. We'll also show you that Casey Michel has a pattern of lying. And we're going to show you in hard proof. But first, okay, let's get right to it. Let me show you the evidence, and then we'll come back and do a deep dive on the material. I'm going to prove this to you right now. Let me show you the source material. Make sure that's showing. Okay, here we go. This is part 6, Civil War, just came out, The Last Resort. Let's take a listen. We're at 19 minutes in. Straight up lie. Straight up lie. Much of that was tied to social media trolls. Straight up lie, repeated by Casey Michel, who knows better, and not fact checked in this documentary, although I gave them the correct information. So let me show you. That quote about Russia meddling in Calexit comes from this article. Russian trolls promoted California independence, November 4th, 2017, by the BBC. This is the article everybody goes to, and they'll print this picture and go, see, Russia backed the whole Calexit thing. And they'll just print this title, which sounds damning. I mean, that looks like Russian trolls promoted California independence, like the whole thing's backed by Russia. That's the way the headline looks. That's the way most of the article reads. You got to read down here, read. And then when you get close to about halfway through the article, you actually find the facts. And here are the facts. Although this tweet was repeated 10,000 times, nearly 2,000 of those accounts have since disappeared from Twitter, indicating they were potentially bots, fake bots, or otherwise violated the terms, networks, and conditions. So they're saying because they found 2,000 bots that pushed the Calexit message that Russia backed Calexit. That's true that Russia backed Calexit 2,000 out of 10,000 times. So 2,000 out of 10,000 is 1/5, which means 4/5 didn't come from Russia. So that's literally the BBC article that Casey Michel's mentioning. And this is literally the quote. 2,000 of the tweet accounts were Russian robots. 8,000 were not. 2,000 are Russian robots, 8,000 were not. That means 80% of the social media traffic was organic and was never proven to come from Russia. That's the fact. I showed you the source article. This is the article. And so when Casey Michel says much of, that's a straight up lie. So when he says much of, he is outright lying. And here's how we know. 2,000's 1/5 of 10,000. That's not much of. I mean, maybe if it was the opposite, where like 2,000 accounts were organic and 8,000 were bots, maybe, but that's the total opposite. So here are the facts. I showed this to the documentary crew. It somehow didn't get in the documentary. Now, I wanted to point out that I showed you the full clip of Casey Michel, so people can't say, it was clipped or whatever. I also want to point out a couple other things. So Casey Michel seems to suggest that Russia's backing Calexit and providing for it. Well, Casey Michel had to admit that there's no evidence of funding from Russia. Now, he didn't admit it in this documentary with Interval Presents, but he has admitted it before. So somehow Casey Michel's earlier admissions that there's no evidence of Russian funding didn't make it into this documentary, even though he said that before. Secondly, Casey Michel was not able to mention the 4 separate investigations that proved we had no collusion, and the investigation by the FPPC that showed that we had no money from Russia. Additionally, the documentary wasn't able to show those things either. Now, I hope it comes out, a couple more episodes. I'm sure it will, but I just want to make sure. There's a lot of things missing with Casey's statement. So Casey had to admit in 2017 in EurasiaNet that there's no evidence has emerged of direct Kremlin funding for the Calexit initiative. He said that in August 2017 in EurasiaNet. Somehow he couldn't mention that in this documentary again. He also had to repeat himself, while Michel was quick to note that there's no indication Marinelli himself has received funding from the Russian government. January 2018, Playboy, also not mentioned by Michel, also not mentioned in the documentary. Finally, this is one of my favorites. September 30th, 2019, the PPIC said, after conducting our investigation and review of the matter, we are closing this case without taking any enforcement action because the allegations have been disproven. So couldn't mention the PPIC thing, couldn't mention that they subpoenaed the bank accounts and couldn't find anything. So here's Casey Michel saying, they're backed by Russia, but I actually said there's no proof. And I actually said there's no proof. And the California government looked into the bank accounts and said there's no proof. But I can't mention this or that. And I'm going to outright lie to you on this statistic. Wow. But it doesn't end there. This is the second time we've actually caught Casey Michel outright lying. His first attempt was in a Think Progress article on February 26, 2018. His second attempt now is the Interval Prevents documentary, the one that just came out on November 15th, 2022. Let me walk you through some of the evidence. This is where Casey Michel lies and says that much of the social media presence was pushed by Russia. Here's the article that says that's a straight up lie. 80% was organic and non-Russian. This is the definitive article that everybody references. Somehow this statistic couldn't be mentioned. I don't know. Secondly, these things. So here is the letter from the FPPIC, September 30th, 2019. After conducting our investigation and review of the matter, we are closing this case without taking any enforcement action because the allegations have been disproven. There it is. They also subpoenaed bank accounts. Here you go. Subpoenaed bank accounts. There you go. There's more of the paperwork from them. Bank of America. We're going to subpoena your bank account from Bank of America. There's the actual warrant for them to do that. And here's the request where they say they are going to look into the bank account. So remember, they're looking into the bank account, officially looking into the bank account. And the result is nothing at all. No evidence found. Again, couldn't be mentioned. What also kind of bothers me is that, they couldn't mention the other investigations that went on. Here's the article from Casey where he says no evidence has emerged of direct Kremlin funding. So that's Casey right there. Literally him saying it. I showed you a couple examples. And so I showed you where, multiple examples of this going on and that we were cleared by the investigation, and none of this could be mentioned. They can't mention it at all. That Casey said there's no evidence. They can't mention the investigation said that. None of that's mentioned in the investigation. And then they go, well, Russia probably looks like maybe they funded the whole thing. And, Russia was much of the backing on social media. So that's a lie. And the suggestion that we were funded is a outright lie disproven. So those are two things outright disproven. So let's not stop there. I want to prove the point. Oops, sorry. Hold on. Share screen, window, document. Got it. Okay, here we go. Okay, score. So this is a word. This is the where we informed the documentary crew. So Jesse Burton works on the documentary crew. Dana Ballout and Katie Hodges also worked on the documentary. It's about Ionov. This was sent on August 22nd, 9:49 a.m. I think it's an important angle that we're interested in that hasn't really been a focus on the news. All the best. So here's me rebiting. Forgive me for too many references, Dana. I have no talking about the other four investigations that completely cleared Yes California. So this is me talking to Dana and Jesse, speaking directly to Jesse and forwarding an email from Dana where I said, yeah, we were cleared by 4 investigations. Also, here's the article where I talk about how we were cleared by 4 investigations. Then I included this email in the chain that mentions the 4 investigations with direct links. So this went all the way up to Dana and Jesse. So I mentioned the investigations. I gave a link to the investigations. I showed the 4 investigations. I also mentioned on another date, July 30th, hey, we got cleared from 4 investigations. And then here's Jesse responding back. So he's reading these emails. That's how we know, because he's responding back. And I said, okay, I'll call you. We'll talk about it. And then I said for the 5th time on August 1st, 2022, hey, the Sacramento Bee tried to make us look like something, and they couldn't mention that we were cleared by 4 investigations. They tried to make it look like we were funded by Russia. So I told the documentary crew at least 4 times, hey, we got cleared by 4 investigations. Now, there's a couple more episodes of the documentary. Maybe it'll come out. It didn't come out in this one, which was suggesting Russian funding and influence by Russia. And literally, I sent them the sources. And again, the sources didn't make it. So maybe they'll make it in future episodes. I'm not sure. We have 2 more. Here's the other time that we caught Casey MICHEL lying. This is the first time. So that happened on February 26, 2018. I emailed every single person in the Think Progress organization. I also emailed some international fact-checking organizations. And I said, Think Progress printed a lie about our organization. Please retract. Here's the article. That's from Casey MICHEL. And here's what Casey MICHEL says. In December 26, Marinelli let it slip that he had begun working with the Russian Internet Research Agency, the same organization targeted in Mueller's indictments, to push his messaging. According to KQED, Marinelli said that he worked with the IRA to raise awareness of Calexit goals. We said when KQED printed that is not true. And I want you to remember this. So KQED is saying that Marinelli worked with the Internet Research Agency, okay? And we said that's not true. But then Casey MICHEL prints this same thing, prints the lie originally printed by KQED. He reprints it in his article at Think Progress. Okay, and I was talking around this date with him. So we emailed his crew and we go, well, here's the thing. The special counsel found no collusion by any American in the IRA's illegal activity. That directly contradicts KQED reporting, and it directly contradicts Casey Michel. That's the Mueller investigation saying what you said's a lie. Here's also another newspaper saying that's true. So, and here's the KQED article where they lied. So KQED said Lewis said he worked with the IRA, and then Mueller's investigation found out that no Americans worked with the IRA, outright disproving KQED. We pointed this out to Casey. He still wanted to print it. Here's what his response. Thank you for your note. Hey, KQED has not changed its reporting on the topic. And we pointed out the KQED reporter deleted all of his tweets arguing with us. And he goes, well, the KQED normally deletes all of his tweets. So, I hear you saying KQED lied, and I hear you saying the Mueller investigation pointed out that's a lie, but, they didn't change the reporting, and you can't really say it's shady that the reporter deleted all of his tweets relating to this argument where we called him out and asked him to because he just deletes his tweets anyways. But yeah, maybe I can put an update clarifying, yes, California disputes KQED. So I didn't put up with that at all. And I re-emailed everybody in the organization. And I didn't respond to Casey. I took Casey's response and re-emailed this whole organization. Yes, California disputes that particular reporter's statement. Already made this public before the article was published. That's fair. Reporter took down his tweets while in the middle of a Twitter battle with us while we were calling him out, and he couldn't show the proof. This is the reason why Slate was going to state the same thing and then backed off after we pointed this out. So Slate was going to say this. We told them, here's the facts. They lied. Slate backed down. And then here's Casey. The article has now been updated, sir. So I told Casey, I told his organization, he lied. Here's the proof, right? It didn't happen. Here's them saying there's nobody working with them. Then Casey reprinted the article and says, yeah, I should be able to use it because KQED did this. And, yeah, people just delete tweets anyways in the middle of arguments, which is not true. So whatever, I think it's fine. Maybe we can clarify. And I said, don't play with me, okay, because I am not playing around. Other people didn't cover it. We called this out. You're reprinting stuff that we called out, and you weren't even going to make the statement that we disputed the reporting until we pointed it out to you. And then Casey there's no more arguing. So this is Casey. Well, actually this, and well, actually this point, and this point. And then after I came back, it was just, the article has now been updated. So this is the example of Casey being called out for printing a lie. And then after he printed the lie, we told everybody in his organization that he printed a lie. He very quickly responded back to us, even though we didn't email him directly. And he said, oh, there's nothing wrong. And I said, yeah, there is. And then he quickly backed down and changed the article to reflect what we said. So this isn't the first time Casey's lied. It's the second time. So he outright lied about the BBC article, and then we showed you he outright lied about the KQED article and the fact that there wasn't evidence attached to it. So I just wanted to point all that out. One last thing. There's another time that Casey lied. So Casey went to this conference. This is the conference. That's me right there. Marcus Ruiz-Evans, Abbeville Institute. I actually made this flyer that Casey's posting up. I personally designed that myself. So I'm at this conference, and Casey goes to the conference, and Casey basically writes an article suggesting that I'm a white supremacist because, yeah, I'm Mexican, but some of these other people were, Confederate supporters and potentially racist. And because I went to speak with them, I therefore support white supremacy. He basically suggested that in an article related to this. So a lot of misleading statements, a couple lies we were able to prove. Now, what were the other things they talked about in episode 6? That we had thought of an embassy, that yes, California put an embassy in Russia. And, the show kind of says, isn't that bizarre? They put this embassy in Russia. Well, again, I provided all these citations. I walked the documentary crew through why we did all these things. None of that made it into the documentary. I don't know why all this material didn't make it into the documentary. Maybe it will in upcoming episodes, but I specifically told them about this and why we did this, and none of that made it into the documentary, so I'll have to show you the information myself now. The reason that we thought of an embassy in Russia was because so many Californians recommended it, and because there was no backlash at the time for going to the international conference. And because an embassy helps us achieve international recognition, making this a serious movement. The movement was not taken seriously before. And frankly, after the embassy was announced, we had the first polls on California independence come out to great fanfare and great attention because the movement was taken seriously. So we did the embassy because a lot of Californians were saying it's cool to talk to Russia. I'll prove this. Don't worry, I'll show you the sources. And because other people said it was a good idea. We also did the embassy because we found out that you need to get international recognition to be an independent country. Russia is on the UN. It's also on the Security Council. And while Russia may not be popular these days, unfortunately, international law over the last 70 years is based upon the UN. So you can't just change international law because Russia doesn't look good these days. They're still on the Security Council. The Security Council still makes all the big decisions. It runs the UN, and the UN is still there. Nothing's changed that. So I understand people are trying to isolate Russia, but this is still international law. And go back in time a couple of years. We didn't know Russia was going to interfere in the election or anything like that. Nobody really cared. I mean, the worst thing Russia did was invade Georgia, and basically George W. Bush said it's cool, and nobody cared. So you got to go back to the time when nobody cared about this at all. We did the embassy because we knew it would show that we could get international recognition from a Security Council member on the UN, which is a key point under international law. Once we did that, we got taken very seriously. And once we were taken very seriously, then they came out with polls showing support for Calexit, and everybody took those seriously. But before we had the embassy, we were still kind of seen as a joke. After the embassy, nobody thought we were a joke. Let me show you some of the examples. Okay, here we go. Okay, 1 second. Okay. So I'll show you all these articles. Why did we think of the embassy? Because so many Californians recommended it, and because there was no backlash at the time. So Nora Campos was a top California legislator, and in February 23rd, 2015, she proposed a California embassy in Washington, D.C., as if California was a separate country. So we got the idea initially from there. Secondly, May 12, 2016, Governor Brown writes an article for California saying America and Russia should be partners. May 12, 2016. Jerry Brown says Russia and America should be partners. September 27th, 2016. Marcus tells Lewis that while Russia was attacked in the article, the press said that California was not a stooge of Russia and attended the conference for its own reason. I'll show you in a second. So that's ABC Television 2016 said we were not a stooge of Russia. We went there for our own. Here's the exact quote from ABC TV. Few conference attendees were concerned they might become Kremlin pawns, seeing it as simply as a way to get their message out. For most of the attendees, the main pull appeared to be the guaranteed presence of the media attracted by the conference's oddity. That's from ABC Television on September 27th, 2016. Said, you know why people went? It wasn't because they wanted to work with Russia. It's because they wanted media attention. Then on September 29th, Marcus tells Lewis, a major think tank in California, said, you should be friendly to Putin because it looks like he's going to be the leader of Russia for a long time. Then I pointed out to Lewis all these facts. And then we went to the Women's March in LA. And nobody asked if we were a Russian organization. So we felt because Nora Campos proposed an embassy and Governor Brown said to be friendly with Russia and Major Zocalo Public Square said to be friendly with Russia and nobody in the Women's March batted an eye about having gone to the conference in Russia. And because ABC television itself said, just because they went to this conference doesn't mean they're pawns. We thought it was okay to build the embassy. I'll show you all those sources in a second. And once we got the embassy, here you go. Los Angeles, CBS LA. If California voters ever decide to secede from the United States, they could have at least one partner on the international stage. That's CBS LA said that. That's when we got international recognition on December 23rd, 2016. We got international recognition because CBS LA said basically we achieved international recognition. I'll show you the article, but let's take a look at this. There's the print. December 23rd, 2016, CBS Los Angeles. The Yes California Pro-Secession Movement now has international recognition, sort of. So that's CBS LA, one of the major networks things saying you guys achieved recognition. What happened right after we got the embassy up and achieved recognition? December 23rd? Well, December 23rd, here's January 23rd, 1 month away, and here's January 19th, about 3 weeks away. Two polls by Stanford University and Reuters Ipsos both came out showing 1/3 supported secession. And those polls were widely covered. Why were they widely covered? Because people just heard about an embassy. And they recognized that an embassy gave California international recognition, sort of. So let me show you some of these sources. Here we go. All right, 1 second here. One second, almost got it. Okay, so let me show you some of the original sources. Here we go. Okay, here's the ABC TV, ABC article where they said people were not going to be stooges of Russia. They were going for media attention. So I showed you the quote. Here's the article. Here's ABC News. They don't say we're a stooge of Russia. What they say is that we went for media attention. ABC News, September 27th. That's what they said. They didn't say we were spies or we wanted to destroy America or anything. And they pointed out Texas was there too. They said, hey, these people just wanted media attention. ABC television said that. Later on, that gets turned into, well, they must have something nefarious doing. But initially, ABC television looked into it and goes, no, everybody's here just for media, which is exactly what we said. Here's the article. California should have an embassy in Washington, lawmaker says on Bloomberg. Here's an article where Jerry Brown, the governor, says William J. Perry, contributor, and Jerry Brown, contributor. William J. Perry was the guy who invented the nuclear policy for America. He says you should work with Russia. December 6, 2017. Here's another article. You should work with Russia from Zocalo Public Square. Zocalo Public Square is a very famous, popular California think tank. September 26th. Nobody said anything. Here's the Women's March. Nobody's asking about Russia. They're already pushing this angle. Nobody asked, not one person. Nobody cares. They're just taking flyers. Women's rights, they want it. So that's why we looked into those things. And there wasn't. Okay. And this is the article that says basically we have international recognition. If we want it, pro-secession group opens up embassy. So this is the one, say, California voters ever decide to secede, they could have at least one partner on the international stage, meaning international recognition. So this is CBS News saying we got international recognition, basically. This is the article. Okay. 1 second. Yeah, so let's go over that one more time just to make sure it's really clear. Okay, so NorCampus proposed an embassy. Jerry Brown said hang out with Russia. ABC Television said we weren't a pawn. We were just there for media. Zocalo Public Square said be cool with Russia. We went to the Women's March and nobody said anything. And that's why we decided to make the embassy, because we knew we would get international recognition. And what did we get after we went to the embassy? International recognition. So we wanted to get international recognition after the embassy, for the embassy, and we did. And there's the international recognition. And then after we had the international recognition, these polls were wildly popular. So I would argue if we didn't have the embassy, we wouldn't have been taken seriously, and the polls wouldn't have come out because there wouldn't have been a market for it and nobody would have cared. This is also just a little factoids. February 21st, I said for him to step down. And then February 16th, 2018, actually I became de facto leader in July 4th, 2017. But this is an article that recognizes I was the de facto leader from at least that time in 18. So February 2018, KQED acknowledges me as the de facto leader. Okay, here we go. One second. Okay. So the other reason that we went to the International Dialogue of Nations is what the article said. We went for media coverage. So we had gotten a lot of media coverage in California. We had been in San Francisco, Bay Area, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Bernardino, Fresno, newspapers and television. There was one day, I think we were protesting in Sacramento, and there was a TV article about us in San Francisco and another one in San Diego TV on the same day. Even though we weren't protesting in San Diego or San Francisco, we were in Sacramento. So we had saturated California media. But we couldn't get anyone in America to cover us. Emailed them, called them, sent 400 emails, nothing. Nobody in America covered us. So we figured the only way in America they would cover what's going on in California, which is something Californians are talking about, was we would have to go outside of America and get Europeans to cover on this. That would embarrass American domestic media that they got scooped and someone was doing their job, and then they would quickly have to cover us. So we got no coverage from anybody outside of California, no matter how many times we pleaded and begged and say, look at all these LA Times articles, can't we get mention from you? Wouldn't even spit in our face in return. We go to that International Dialogue of Nations conference, which ABC Television admitted people were there for media. Guess what happens in 24 hours? Well, we get ABC Television and the New York Times to cover us. So they would never touch us before, but then within 24 hours of going to that international conference, we get national media. We had tried to get national media before, and they never responded. Let me show you. I know, paywall. Here you go. Let me show you again. Oops. That's the article. One more time, just so you can see it. That's the article, New York Times. And here's the article from ABC TV. Now, the interesting thing, ABC TV never talked about us. New York Times never talked about us until after we went to the conference. We emailed everybody, couldn't get any national media attention at all. We go to that international conference, we get in German, French, Russian, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Brazilian, English news, guess what happens in 24 hours? New York Times, ABC starts covering us. So you can say what you want, but if we didn't do the embassy, you wouldn't have taken the movement seriously. And if you didn't take the movement seriously, they never would have commissioned those polls, because why? It's a silly idea. And the polls were the thing that really put the movement over the top. And if the American media had given us attention when we had saturated California news, which would be normal, we never would have gone to the international conference, but they didn't. And so we said, look, we're going to have to force you to cover us and do your job. And guess what? Within 24 hours of going to the conference, we got international media. So we went to the conference to get international media. ABC TV reported that was the reason. And I just showed you the media that we got afterwards that we could never get before the conference. And we made the embassy so that we would be taken seriously. And I just showed you how CBS said, wow, these guys basically achieved international recognition, and that coincidentally happened a month before the polls were released to major fanfare. All of this was not mentioned at all. So I told the documentary crew this a couple times, a couple more episodes of the documentary. I hope it gets in there. So far, it's not. Last comment. There's a comment from Stephen Marsh, who wrote a book on secession, and he says, I don't think Calexit could happen because a peaceful negotiation can't happen because America's so polarized. That's the point. A peaceful negotiation can happen because America's so polarized. So Stephen Marsh at the end of the documentary, episode 6, says, yeah, you can't have a peaceful negotiation because things are so polarized. Here's the thing. I just did a video a while back where we've been talking to conservatives in multiple states over multiple years. And we went to Texas and talked to them. And I still talk to conservatives. And I still get on conservative news. And every time we ask them, would you vote California out? They say yes. So if we're so polarized we can't have negotiation, then how come I, as a liberal, am able to go to every single conservative I've ever met, bring up the idea of would you vote in California, and they all say yes? And secondly, how come I'm the liberal that's talked to more conservatives than almost any other liberal in America in the last 2 years? And how come I'm come to the conclusion that while we can't come to an agreement, they have no problem voting us out? None of that mentioned by Stephen Marsh. Also, Stephen Marsh never went and interviewed conservatives and asked them their opinion. He just offered his opinion of what conservatives would say. When we tell conservatives, hey, we got a bunch of liberals who say you never vote us out, they get offended. They say, you guys never even bothered to talk to us. We would definitely vote you out. Secondly, they mentioned Rachel Maddow, and in the documentary, Rachel Maddow gives a big slam on Calexit. What was not mentioned in the documentary was that Rachel Maddow actually endorsed Calexit. Rachel Maddow did 2 shows on Calexit. The first show she did was Javier Becerra. And she basically had the Yes California logo and was encouraging people to join Yes California logo. My face was on there. I was on the Rachel Maddow show, basically. Then Rachel Maddow did another show later on where she condemned Calexit and never mentioned that she did a previous show celebrating Calexit. In the documentary, they also don't bring up that while Rachel Maddow slammed Calexit, she also encouraged people to join it a month or 2 before. So not mentioned. I want to make sure all those facts get out there. That's it. Thank you for checking it out. There's a couple more episodes of the documentary. We hope this stuff gets out, but we have to make sure that this information is correct. And I want you to see, we try to get the facts out. We have the sources. We're exceptionally detailed and note-taking. And then sometimes reporters will straight up lie and not double check their sources. And I just showed you that. That's why Calexit hasn't happened. If you know me, you've heard me say, hey, if we could just get the facts out, we'd have a good discussion. But, when people lie about the amount of Russian interference in a thing in an official documentary, when the evidence is there easily, you can search and find that that's not true. It's difficult. I won't quit until we actually get the facts out. So when people are ready to get the real facts out and we're debated in a debate, I'll quit. But I'm not going to quit for games. And we made sure not to mention your side or use any of your sources or talk about it in your background. And we just went with what someone else said and didn't ask them about your counterpoints. That's not a fair debate, and I don't respect it. Okay, see you soon.